Hello, culinary students. Let's go ahead and do some review for how we're going to roll out our dough next week in lab. So when I come back to the kitchens, I'll go through my regular routine, wash my hands, get my sink ready, and then be sure to preheat your oven. Once your oven is preheated, now you can start getting to work with your cookie dough. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get just a couple scoops of flour so I can get my counter floured so it's not going to stick when I'm rolling it out. So I'm just going to take like 2 or 3 scoops of flour and put it into a custard cup. It's not going to take a lot. If I'm using more than that, I'm a little worried I'm going to dry out my cookies, and that's not ideal. So I'm going to set this off to the side. I'm going to have my rolling pin out. I'm going to use a pastry brush today, and then I'm going to get my dough. So when you come in, you will have dough sectioned out on the counter, and you'll just have to grab a piece. I'm just taking out one of the big chunks that we pre-made. So I'm going to just take a little chunk of the dough. So you'll get about like that much dough, okay? And I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to use a cookie cutter today. This one's a football helmet shape. So at this point, I'm ready to go. Cookie cutter, rolling pin, pastry brush, and then I would have my baking sheet with my parchment paper, remembering to put my name on it in pencil. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to flour my surface. Again, we don't want anything sticking. So I'm going to use a strainer. This is a strainer because we don't have traditional sifters, but this works really well. So I'm just going to take it and lightly flour my counter. Okay. Then I'm going to lightly flour my rolling pin. I'm going to take my dough, set it on the flour, flip it over a couple times so it gets a little bit of flour on it, pat it down a little, flip it over, pat it down a little. Okay, now I'm ready to start rolling. So what I want to do is kind of roll in a U shape. So U shape like this. That way I'm not smushing my ends down. So I'm just going to push down and lift up, 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 push down and lift up. I don't want my edges to get thinner than my middles. Otherwise, my edges of my cookies are going to burn. Now at this point, I'm getting pretty good, so I want to check it with my pinky finger again to see if it's the right thickness. It looks like I could go just a hair more. So again, using pinky finger, flat around the dough to see if it's the correct thickness. So just a little bit more and that should do it. And also make sure, like, move the dough around, make sure it wasn't sticking to the counter. So what I'm going to do then is I'll take my cookie cutter, kind of toss it around in the flour a little bit here so it gets floured up. And then I want to see how I can position to get as many of these helmets as I can. So I'm going to line up my cookie cutter on the edge here, press down, lift up. If the cookie sticks, that's fine. It'll come out over here, but if it was sticking, get a little bit more flour on those edges so it doesn't end up ripping your design. So then I'm going to come back in and I'm going to see, oh, I don't know if I'll be able to get 3 out of this, but we'll try it out. So push down, lift up, and then we'll move this little guy out of the way, and then however I can position, ooh, I'm going to just barely get a 3rd one. I'll have a little spot missing there, but that's okay. All right, so then there's my 3rd one. Now with my scraps, what I'm going to do is I'll put these back together and I'll get them back in a ball. I'm going to roll them out, do the same thing, try to get as many cookies. Now you're going to get to a point where you have an amount of dough and you're thinking, oh, I just can't get another cookie out of this that's the same as my other helmets. At that point, I want you to make a scrap cookie. So what you're going to do is you're going to roll it in your hands like a molded cookie. Okay, and then I want you to just flatten it out to about the thickness of your helmet. So just kind of flatten it out like that. My little edge got a little thin there, so we'll just bunch it back up. But yeah, so that'll be about the size of my other helmets, and then I can bake these up. Now before I put them in the pan, I'm going to actually brush off the cookies. I want to get all this excess flour off because that's going to dry out the cookie. So I just lightly brush the cookie, like lightly, because if I push too hard, it's going to start stretching the dough out, and then I'm going to start losing my design. So just light. Think like tiptoe on the tulips, tiptoe on the tulips. Okay, so I'm going to do that with each one of my cookies. And then once I've done that, I can get them onto my baking sheet. Again, my parchment is labeled, with my name. And if I'm sharing a pan, I've got my divider line on there so we know whose are whose. and then at that point I'll be able to bake them. So our range again is 6 to 8 minutes. We want to go with 6, and then what I should notice when they're done is it should start to lose this raw appearance. It should start to look a little bit dry, but in a good way. And we'll be able to see that it goes from this raw color more to a little bit lighter, drier, baked color. And if you need help seeing that, I will totally show you that when we're baking our cookies. Otherwise, that's how we're gonna roll out our dough. When you're done and you're ready for cleanup, what I'd like for you to do is take that cookie cutter, and I want you to scour the counters, is what I call it. So take it and go in a circular motion, and that's gonna release any dough that was sticking to the counter with the flour. And then what we'll do is we'll get the garbage can, so we'll bring this one over. We're gonna put it right up to the counter. I'm going to brush this excess flour into the garbage, because if I go at this with the wet washcloth right now, I am going to make a gummy, sticky mess, and I'm not gonna really like my cleanup today. So once I get most of that excess flour off, now I can come back in with my dishcloth, get this scrubbed down, and then do just my regular cleaning of counters. Be sure your counters are scrubbed down really well, because what we'll do is we'll kind of do the hand wipe test, and if we feel any like little gritty grime stuff left over from rolling out the dough, that obviously isn't a clean counter and we need to try that again. Cookie cutters, make sure we clean these up really well. If there's little parts that get tight and you can't get the dough out for cleaning, we can get out some toothpicks and you can get into those little nooks and crannies, so every cookie cutter is looking good when we put it away. Rolling pins. These are not to be submerged in the water because it can splinter the wood. So when you wash it, rinse it, and then you're to the point of sanitizing, just dip it in the sanitizer and take it out right away. Set it on the towel so we don't damage our rolling pins. Pastry brushes. These you can wash, rinse, sanitize like normal. What we're going to notice is that it's going to take a while for these bristles to dry out. So what I need you to do is just leave these sitting so they can air dry really good, away from any little water spots or puddle spots. Strainers, wash, rinse, dry just like normal. These should be cleaned and ready for the next groups to go. And then my other dishes, it's pretty standard procedure. So that's how we're gonna roll out our dough. That's some about our cleanup. So I'm excited to see what we do on Monday and Tuesday.